Well, joining me now is a former spokesperson for the Israeli government, Eylon Levy, who is in Tel Aviv. Very good to talk to you today, Eylon. Can I ask you what you make of the latest statements that we've had coming from France and Canada and the UK, and the cessation of trade talks between the UK and Israel? It feels like something significant has shifted. What do you make of the change?
Of course, I'll gladly answer your question, but if I can first of all address the accusation made by your correspondent, Alistair Bunkle now, quoting Tom Fletcher, the UN humanitarian chief, who said that 14,000 babies are going to die in 48 hours if food doesn't reach them. The UN has already admitted there is no evidence for that. The UN spread a hoax. Mr. Fletcher made the number up. The IPC had previously said that 14,000 children may suffer malnutrition in the space of a year if food doesn't reach them. He somehow made children babies and said that they were going to die, not be malnourished, and said it was going to happen in 48 hours rather than in a year. I think Mr. Fletcher needs to resign. He needs to apologise for sparking a media panic across the world based on absolute misinformation, and all media channels need to retract it. The BBC has already done that. Now, as for the question of Britain, France and Canada, all we need to know about that is that Hamas has praised Britain, France and Canada for their decision. And I hope that being praised by the terrorist army that launched the murderous attacks of October 7th gives Mr. Lamy and other foreign secretaries food for thought. The reason that Hamas is praising Britain is because it thinks Britain has thrown it a lifeline. Hamas is pro-Lamy because it thinks Lamy is pro-Hamas. Hamas thinks that this pressure is going to force Israel to end the war that Hamas started, with Hamas still in power. And if Western countries want to use their leverage properly in order to end this war, they should have one demand against the Hamas regime. It needs to lay down its arms, release the hostages, and this horrible war they started on October 7th, 2023 can finally end.
What do you think the Israeli government, though, thinks of the British government's stance?
I think Israel thinks this is a terrible betrayal by an ally that has decided to succumb to public pressure instead of standing firm as Israel fights against a terrorist army that is threatening more and more October 7th massacres. Look, the reason that Israel is standing firm against Hamas is that we want this to be the last Gaza war. This has to be the last Gaza war. And Israel recognizes that if this war ends with Hamas still in power, if reconstruction begins, allowing Hamas to rebuild its tunnels, restock its missile silos, with hostages still starving in the dungeons of Gaza, then the next war will be a matter of time. And the next war will be worse. And it will be worse because Hamas will conclude that the West will keep saving it from the wars that it started. Because Hamas will conclude that its human sacrifice strategy, its strategy of hiding inside homes and schools and hospitals, has been successful and has been vindicated. And that is not the lesson that Hamas can be allowed to draw from this war. And that's why it's so important that we hear global pressure on Hamas. Lay down your arms, go into exile, release those poor hostages, and this horrible war we can finally put behind us.
You talk about it being the last Gaza war. We had comments yesterday from the Israeli Finance Minister, Bezalel Smotrich, that Gaza will be entirely destroyed and the Palestinian population will leave in great numbers. Do you back those comments?
Mr. Smotrich is speaking for a section of the Israeli population that saw people in Gaza celebrating after October 7th, heard testimonies from hostages who were held in civilian homes, and have concluded that there is simply no way that we can live in peace next to a population that overwhelmingly supported the October 7th massacre. Now, call me naive, but I do believe that peace is possible between Israel and Gaza. But I think there is going to be a price. That price is the destruction of Hamas, the demilitarization of Gaza, and the de-radicalization of the population. The population in Gaza, the people who overwhelmingly supported the October 7th massacre, need to be weaned off the jihadi ideology that led them to celebrate those barbaric atrocities. And if the world is willing to do that, to make sure Hamas is out of the picture, that Gaza is completely demilitarized and cannot be used as a base for attacks against Israel, and that we move away from the jihadi ideology that motivated October 7th, then I think we can have peace between Israel and Gaza.
You talk about weaning people off Gaza off Hamas inside Gaza, and Smotrich talked about the Palestinian population leaving in great numbers. The International Criminal Court says the deportation and forcible transfer of citizens is a crime against humanity. Isn't that effectively what the Israeli government is suggesting?
I think the Israeli government's position is that anyone who wants to leave voluntarily should be allowed to leave. And we need to put this on the table. Asylum is a human right. Nobody should be forced to live under Hamas tyranny against their will, and no one should be trapped in a war zone against their will. You and Sky News have already covered how...
Where could they go?
Well, from what I understand from media reports, the Trump administration has been in discussion with several countries that may wish to offer asylum to these people who have been trapped under Hamas tyranny. Many of them have already bravely spoken out against the Hamas regime and protested despite the threats of executions. One possibility is that Egypt should allow them to claim asylum. Personally, I think it's shocking that when the war started and Israel urged civilians to leave Hamas strongholds, where Hamas was deliberately trying to hide inside and under civilian homes, there wasn't a demand on Egypt to allow temporary passage to civilians. Egypt was charging thousands of dollars for people to pay for visas in order to get out of the war zone. So no, I don't think anyone should be forced to leave, but I do think anyone who wants to escape a war zone, asylum is a human right, and they should be allowed to do that.
A final thought about aid trucks getting in. Why is the Israeli government not letting more aid trucks get in? Before the war, 600 trucks a day were going in. Now just 65 across Kerem Shalom yesterday. And as we've heard from the aid agencies, they're having to unload them. The Pope has today renewed calls to get aid in. Is this shameful that the Israeli government is not allowing more aid in to the hungriest?
First of all, perhaps a task for the Sky News fact-checking team. 600 trucks of aid were not going into the Gaza Strip every day before the war. If you go to the UN OCHA website, you can see that about 70 to 80 food trucks went in every single day. Half of all the trucks that went in before the war were concrete, construction supplies. And they went into building the 400 miles of tunnels that Hamas dug underneath homes and mosques and schools inside Gaza. So let's peg things realistically. Now, in the course of the war, Israel has let in over 1.7 million tons of aid into the Gaza Strip. During the last ceasefire, nearly 500,000 tons of aid. That was enough to last several months. It created a surplus, and Hamas hijacked that surplus in order to finance its own war machine.
And I spoke to UNICEF directly yesterday, and they denied these charges. UNICEF have said that all of the aid that is delivered to them in Gaza is handed by them to families. All the medicine that is given to UNICEF in Gaza goes into people's arms and into people's mouths. They said any aid that is given to UNICEF only goes to the people in Gaza.
Of course, they say that, and yet we've seen images of food being sold at extortionate prices in markets in Gaza. How did they reach there? Well, they reached the markets because of profiteering and because the Hamas regime, which is the government in Gaza, has been hijacking it. I refer you, don't take my word for it. The Wall Street Journal reported just a few weeks ago that Hamas is running so low on cash it can't pay its fighters because it hasn't been able to intercept supplies. These are the same UN agencies that claim they have no idea how Hamas managed to seize enough concrete to build 400 miles of tunnels, concrete that was meant to go to civilian reconstruction. So I think these agencies have played an appalling role in turning a blind eye to Hamas's theft of aid. But here's the important point. It is important that aid reach people who need it while making sure that Hamas cannot steal it. And that is exactly what Hamas did during the last ceasefire. Hamas used the supply of international aid in order to finance its war machine and prolong this war. And the new method, the new mechanism that Israel is backing, led by the United States, aims to create a balance between the humanitarian needs of the population, who are clearly suffering, and the security needs of Israel to stop the Hamas army being able to refuel and finance its war machine. And anyone who seriously cares about humanitarian supplies in Gaza needs to get behind a mechanism that ensures that aid is delivered directly to civilians without stopping at a warehouse in the middle where the Hamas government of Gaza is able to intercept it, enrich itself, and prolong this war, making it last far longer than it ever should.
So is the Pope wrong to say that he thinks aid should be going in now?
I'll repeat my position. Aid needs to reach the people who need it while making sure that Hamas cannot steal it. The existing mechanism is corrupt. It is broken. It has been exploited by Hamas in order to extend this war. The sad fact is that food donated by the British taxpayer was hijacked by Hamas, taxed, sold on the black market, and used to pay the terrorists who are currently starving 23 hostages in the dungeons of Gaza. That mechanism is not fit for use. So I think the world needs to support the US-led initiative to get aid directly to the people who need it, by allowing distribution directly to them in multiple distribution points across the Gaza Strip, rather than relying on a network of UN agencies that have been turning a blind eye to Hamas hijacking aid that was meant to go to hungry civilians.
Eylon Levy, we shall leave it there. Of course, the UN agencies that you refer to do deny the charges that you're making against them. Eylon Levy, former Israeli government spokesperson, thank you very much.
Thank you.